What if I told you that a man's greatest victories were born from his enemies' mistakes? Tarquin, the legendary Immortal Warrior, survived impossible ambushes and crushed formidable foes. But he didn't win alone. It was 7 fatal mistakes that paved the way for his legend. In the most brutal campaigns of the Roman Empire, Tarquin wasn't just a soldier. He was the nightmare of enemy commanders. And what made his conquests even more extraordinary? Critical strategic blunders and acts of arrogance that handed victories straight into his grasp. These mistakes not only saved him from death, but forged him into the man who could never be defeated. Now imagine the psychological impact. For his allies, Tarquin was the embodiment of invincibility. For his enemies, a harbinger of inevitable defeat. What went through the minds of those who faced the immortal? And how did he turn others' failures into opportunities to etch his name in history? This isn't just the story of Tarquin. It's a study of how glory can rise from arrogance and error. What were the 7 mistakes Tarquin's enemies made? How did each one shape the victories that made him legendary? And was his fame as immortal simply a matter of luck? Or was there more behind his ability to always emerge unscathed? In today's video, we'll unravel each of these questions and uncover the secrets behind Tarquin's most fascinating campaigns. You'll discover the details of poorly planned ambushes, arrogant decisions, and battles that Tarquin turned into epic victories. We'll reconstruct the fights, explore the context, and reveal how his enemies' mistakes bolstered his legend, reshaping the course of Roman history. If you love epic stories and want to dive into the behind-the-scenes of the Roman Empire's greatest legends, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you help keep these incredible stories alive and ensure you don't miss a single detail of the journeys we'll uncover next. Now, get ready to discover the 7 mistakes that created Tarquin, the Immortal. In the narrow confines of a steep valley, Tarquin faced what should have been his first and final test as a young commander. Outnumbered and seemingly outmaneuvered, he appeared destined for defeat. His enemies, overconfident in their superior numbers, failed to coordinate their forces effectively. This misstep allowed Tarquin to exploit the terrain, turning the bottleneck into an advantage. With precision and calm under pressure, he led a series of swift, guerrilla-style counterattacks, splitting the enemy ranks and dismantling their strategy piece by piece. What started as a certain death trap became the first chapter in the legend of Tarquin, the Immortal. This victory wasn't just about brute force. It was a masterclass in adaptation. Tarquin had proven his ability to see opportunity where others saw only chaos. Yet, as word of his success spread, so did the arrogance of his adversaries. One such commander, convinced that Tarquin's triumph was mere luck, sought to crush him in their next encounter. But was this confidence a show of strength or the seed of another devastating mistake? Not long after his initial victory, Tarquin found himself up against a seasoned enemy general, renowned for his battlefield prowess. The veteran commander dismissed Tarquin as an inexperienced upstart, rushing to strike without securing his supply lines or accounting for hidden threats. It was a mistake that would cost him dearly. While the general advanced his main forces with reckless speed, Tarquin deployed his troops in the surrounding forests. When the moment was right, his hidden forces launched a devastating ambush on the enemy's unprotected supply chain. Panic rippled through the ranks, forcing a humiliating retreat. This triumph solidified Tarquin's growing reputation, not just as a warrior, but as a tactician who exploited the blind spots of his opponents. Yet, as his victories mounted, so did the scale of the challenges ahead. Soon, Tarquin would face an enemy determined to trap him inside his own fortress, cutting off all escape routes. Would patience and cunning be enough to overcome an impossible siege? Or would this be where his legend ended? Encircled and vastly outnumbered, Tarquin found himself trapped inside a fortress with no apparent way out. His enemies, confident in their overwhelming advantage, tightened their grip, certain that starvation and time would do the work for them. But their arrogance led to complacency. Under the cover of darkness, when vigilance was at its weakest, Tarquin orchestrated a daring escape. Dividing his forces into small, silent groups, he slipped past the enemy lines. Before dawn, he launched a surprise attack on their supply depot, crippling their resources and morale. The siege that was meant to be his undoing became a defining moment in his ascent to legend. Tarquin had demonstrated that patience could be as lethal a weapon as swords or arrows. However, his next challenge would test more than his strategic genius. It would test his ability to predict his enemy's decisions. When faced with treacherous terrain and an overconfident rival, could he once again turn the tide of battle? Determined to end Tarquin's streak of victories, a rival commander chose the battlefield with care. Or so he thought. The chosen ground, near a sprawling swamp, seemed ideal for trapping Tarquin's forces. But the terrain turned against the commander himself. Heavy rains turned the area into a quagmire, making movement nearly impossible for his troops. Tarquin, foreseeing the disaster, positioned his army on higher, firmer ground. When the enemy's advance slowed to a crawl in the mud, his forces rained down projectiles and launched calculated strikes, overwhelming the trapped soldiers below. The swamp became a graveyard, not for Tarquin, but for the ambition of those who underestimated him. Yet, even as this battle ended, a new threat loomed on the horizon. Two rival factions, desperate to bring him down, formed an uneasy alliance. But could these divided forces truly unite against a foe who thrived on exploiting disarray? As two rival factions joined forces, their alliance seemed like an insurmountable challenge for Tarquin. On paper, their combined strength far exceeded his. But beneath their unity lay cracks of mistrust and poor coordination. Tarquin, ever the keen observer, waited for the inevitable chaos. When the Allied forces began to miscommunicate, their attacks turned into friendly fire, sowing confusion in their ranks. Seizing the moment, Tarquin led his troops in a swift and decisive assault on the heart of their formation, further deepening the chaos and routing the disorganized alliance. This victory wasn't just another chapter in Tarquin's tale. It was proof of his uncanny ability to exploit human nature. Even as his legend grew, his enemies' desperation to stop him only played into his hands. However, their next attempt would be different. This time, they plotted an ambush designed to leave no room for error. Would their careful planning finally undo him? Or would their overconfidence once again prove their downfall? Frustrated by repeated failures, Tarquin's enemies meticulously crafted a flawless ambush. Every detail, from the timing to the terrain, was calculated to ensure his destruction. Yet, even the best-laid plans can falter when arrogance takes hold. One of the rival commanders, eager for personal glory, launched the attack prematurely, revealing their position. Tarquin, ever vigilant, quickly turned the tables. Feigning retreat, he lured his enemies into a narrow pass, where his forces lay in wait. The hunters became the hunted as Tarquin's army encircled and crushed the overextended ambushers. With each victory, Tarquin's reputation grew, not only as a brilliant tactician, but as a warrior who could see one step ahead of his enemies. But his greatest test was yet to come, a renowned general, with both the resources and intelligence to challenge him, prepared for a final confrontation. Would this be the end of Tarquin's invincibility, or the ultimate proof of his immortality? The stage was set for Tarquin's most critical battle. His opponent, a celebrated general with an unmatched reputation, was determined to shatter the legend of the immortal. Unlike Tarquin's previous adversaries, this general carefully studied his past victories, devising a strategy designed to counter his every move. Confident in his superior forces, the general disregarded reports of reinforcements approaching under Tarquin's command. This oversight proved fatal. In a brilliantly executed maneuver, Tarquin's hidden forces encircled the enemy, cutting off their escape and dismantling their army from within. As the dust settled, Tarquin stood victorious once again, his legend solidified in the annals of history. But was his undefeated streak truly a testament to strategy and skill? Or had the mistakes of his enemies played a greater role than anyone cared to admit? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, did Tarquin's enemies lose to him, or to their own arrogance. As we saw in Tarquinius' epic victories, sometimes the mistakes of his enemies were his greatest advantage. But what if, instead of enemies, entire Roman legions disappeared without a trace? Imagine how a single fateful decision could erase a legendary unit from history. Want to uncover the truth behind the Roman legions that vanished? Click here to dive into the mystery of the lost legions and discover what went wrong for units like Legio IX Hispana. You won't want to miss this thrilling journey through Roman history.